everyone, it's Stacey. The countdown is on for Christmas and I know you're all super busy, so I just wanted to do a quick little project this week that might help you with your last minute preparations, and it's a little gift bag. So with these gift bags, you can really make them any size you'd like. I'm going to be making a smaller one, so I've cut 2 pieces of fabric at 8 inches by 10 inches, and I'm using directional fabric, so I need to make sure it's facing me the correct way, with the longer edges on these sides and the shorter edges at the top and bottom. Then what I'm going to do is take a ruler and I'm going to measure from the top edge of one of the fabrics. Sorry, I'll just flip that over. We need to be working on the wrong side of the fabric. And I'm going to measure 3.5 inches from the top of the fabric. So I'm just using my ruler to find 3.5 inches, and then I'm going to draw a line with my chalk pencil. Then I'm going to come down and measure 1/2 inch from the line I just drew. So I'm finding 1/2 inch on my ruler and I'm lining it up with the line that I just drew. And I'm drawing that line. And then I'm going to measure 1/4 inch. So again, lining it up, the ruler on the line that I just drew at 1/4 inch, and I'm going to draw a line. Then what I'm going to do is place the right sides together, and then we're just going to pin it in place. You can use as many as you like or as little, or you don't have to pin if you don't want to. I'm just going to pop a couple in each of the corners, lining up all those edges. Now we are going to have some raw edges, so one way of getting around that is if you've got some pinking shears, you could just do the edges with your scissors. Otherwise it's not going to be used heavily, so I don't really think it's going to be a problem. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew down on both the edges, the long edges. We're going to sew down to this first line and then do a back stitch. Then we're going to start here, do a back stitch on that second line, and then sew all the way down, and we'll do that on both sides. So I've got my standard foot on. I'm going to be sewing at 3/8 inch, and it doesn't really matter your seam allowance. You can work out what's best for you, and I'm going to be stitching at stitch length 2.5. And I will do a back stitch, just so we remember to do that at every step. So I'm just going to sew down to that first line. Then when I get to the line, I will do a back stitch. Trim the threads. Then I'm going to start at the second line we drew, using exactly the same seam allowance. I'm going to stitch forward a couple of stitches, then go back up to that line, and then come all the way down to the end. Now I will do a back stitch here. If you were doing bigger bags, you could just carry on stitching right the way around and then carry on turning and then coming up and stopping at that second line there. But because this is a smaller bag, I think it's going to be easier to use my free arm, like I said, in a few moments. And now what I'll do is I'll do exactly the same on the other side. Now we're going to give it a quick press. So the first thing we're going to do is just press these seams open quickly. So I'm just going to open it up so I can get to these seams here with my iron. Just give them a finger press and press them open. I'm just trying not to press that the best I can. I got a little bit, but you can't avoid that. And then on the other side, and now what we're going to do from the top, and this smaller part is the top half, is I'm just going to fold that down about 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to do it by eye. You could measure it if you'd like. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but that looks pretty good to me. Might be a titchy bit more than 1/4 inch, and then I'll press. Looks like it's not sitting properly there, so I'll just fix that up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold down this edge that we've just created down to this last line. And I'm just going to make sure those seams that I pressed are all just sitting nicely and open. And then I'm lining up this edge with the edge that I drew, that last line that we drew rather. So on the back, I'm just folding it down to approximately the same width as the front. And that looks good to me. So I'll just give that a quick press. And now we're going to sew along this edge. I'm just going to pop in a few pins, just one on either side, just to make sure it's sitting nicely in how I want to sew it down. And I've got a free arm on my sewing machine, which means I can just pull this piece off and I can pop the opening in and sew around it very easily. If you didn't have a free arm, you'd just have to sew it really carefully and just check that you're not accidentally sewing that under piece down and onto the seam here. You just have to be really careful of that. So now what I'm going to do is sew along that edge at about 1/8 of an inch. So I might as well start on a seam so it's nice and tidy. Okay, and then I did a back stitch so it's nice and secure, and I'll just cut those threads. And now what we need to do is stitch about 1/2 inch out from the stitches that we just did. So I'll do exactly the same. I'm going to start on my seam, work out about 1/2 inch from those stitches, sew all the way around and then do a back stitch. And then when we're done, let's trim those threads. So now what we're going to do is just quickly sew it shut. So I'll just pop a pin in to make sure those edges are all lined up nicely. And I will do a back stitch. And I'll do a back stitch at the other end. And then I will just cut those corners off just to reduce a little bit of bulk, being careful not to cut the stitches. Then we're going to turn it right sides out, and then I'll use my point turner to get those corners out nicely. You could use a chopstick if you don't have a point turner. I do think they're a pretty handy little tool, so if you don't have one, it might be a nice little cheap item to put on your Christmas list this year. So I'll just give these seams a quick press. I'll just roll them out so they're sitting really nicely. Give them a finger press and press. And I'll do that on all 3 sides. And we might as well iron the whole thing while we're here. Now let's put our ribbon in. So now we're going to make our drawstring, and I'm going to use ribbon. I've cut 2 pieces at approximately 20 inches long, and I'm just going to take a safety pin, pop it in up the top, well at the end of one of the ribbons, and then find one of the openings on the side and feed the safety pin through. So I'm just going to push the safety pin through and all the way around. So I'm going to come past this seam, and it can be a bit fiddly. And then I'm going to come out at the same side that I went in on, take my pin off, line up the edges and just put a knot in there. So now we've done one side. You could just leave it like that if you'd like, but I'm going to do one on the other side. I'm going to put my safety pin in at the end of my ribbon, and then I'm going to come to the other side that I didn't do, and I'm going to go right the way around on this side. Now it'll be a little bit fiddly on this side, so you just have to do your best and push past all the ribbon and carry on going around. Okay, so pulling that through, matching up the two ends, and I'll just give that a bit of a tug so they're sitting nice and evenly. And then tying a knot for those two ends. Okay, so now we've got our ribbon on both sides. We've got our opening, and then we can pull it shut and then tie a little bow on the front. And then we have our little gift bag. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Don't forget you can make them any size you'd like, and if your ribbon is slightly wider, just make sure you add on a little bit of space when you're sewing that second row of stitching. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for watching my videos. If you're enjoying them, please like, subscribe and leave a comment.